I would think that we have just a few minutes. The original idea was that the introductions would be a little bit shorter, but we may have time for 2 or 3 short questions. Short questions, 1, 2, and okay, we have 2. Better. Please, sir, go ahead. Your name, please.
Yes, Jay Schultz. Hello. Originally from New Jersey, now 7 years in Tel Aviv. Concerning most Jewish communities outside of Israel, intermarriage between 40 to 75%. In your communities, do you think the Sachdut, the Jewish agency, is doing a great job promoting Aliyah as an idealistic vision?
Thank you. The other question is from Mr.
Rafi Nasser from São Paulo, Brazil. Why are you speaking about the 20% abroad Israel and the United States? There's not assimilation in the United States. You have to speak about the 60% abroad Israel. The United States is not like Israel. Now, in the United States, you have a lot of assimilation, I thought. And the one thing more, I think there is no miracle to do. We need Jewish education. We need youth movement Zionists, like Philip said, and I think we need synagogue also. Of course, we are all Zionists here, but only Israel is not enough. The evangelist people in Brazil love Israel, but they are not Jewish. So we need synagogue, you need education, and you need so you have to discuss how to bring these people to this kind of life of Jews.
Thank you. Well, of course, this is an occasion for dialogue and thinking, but I think there are some interesting policy suggestions that might emerge even from this session. Now, before having a second and final round, I would like to somewhat summarize a few of the points we have heard here, and I think there was wide agreement across the table on certain processes. The fact that the globalization of the economy, of culture, of communications, and to some extent of international migrations has created an entirely new situation, and the relevance and intensity of global connections is something that of course is relatively new, especially if we look at the latest generation of communication gadgets, which is really transforming the concept of what a human network is, and the concept of boundaries. Where is the boundary? It is an entirely new game, and I start from this consideration in throwing back the question about is the Jewish institutional system, is the Jewish organizational web adequate and understanding and responding to these new challenges? My impression is that there is a growing gap between what happens in the street and what happens among the people and what happens in terms of the existing organization. By the way, I promised Alan I would provoke him, but he says that he said that the government of Israel is going to double his investment. To be honest, I'm not impressed. 1 billion shekel is really peanuts, to be honest. But the point is this: as we are all aware, that there is a new discovery, gas, in front of the shore. Let me ask you this, ladies and gentlemen. Who's the owner of the gas? Is this the state of Israel? Is this the Jewish people? How much of the royalties of the gas should go to the Jewish people and not to some private entrepreneurs? And therefore, since this morning in the news they were speaking of $60 billion, maybe $20 billion should go to the Jewish people, and 20 to the state of Israel, and 20 to the entrepreneurs. Alan, throw this to your colleagues and superiors. The other point which, in my view, is intriguing is that we see a kind of polarization between, on the one hand, the processes of assimilation and distancing, which are certainly a reason of concern, but at the same time, the fact that Jewish life continues to be active. The interest in the religion has increased. The interest for Israel sometimes in favor, sometimes against, but not being indifferent to what happens in Israel is all across the board. I think there are very, very, very few Jewish individuals who can say, I don't know what Israel is and where it is because it concerns. So on the one hand, kind of diminution and loss of contents and identity, but on the other hand, a strengthening of this. So this is a kind of interesting contradiction that is, of course, a new game. The other, one of the other, there were several interesting points, but one particularly intriguing is the potential role of Jews as mediators in Jewish society, in a society that sometimes formally accepts them. And by the way, Alan mentioned the anti-Semitism survey promoted by the Fundamental Rights Agency. I'm glad you did, because I am one of those who did the survey, and the results are truly intriguing. On the one hand, there is this widespread sense of concern. On the other hand, many think it is not the greatest preoccupation, because the greatest preoccupation of European Jewry is, after all, with general unemployment and the conditions of the economy and violence and racism. And of course, anti-Semitism is part of that, but it is not the only concern. Well, this may bring us to see another, under certain conditions, a further reshuffling of the geography. But to conclude and reopen the floor, the question of the corporate response of global Jewry. Is it adequate to the challenges, and therefore do we need to think of new forms, of a new table of negotiation, a new forum around which representatives, both institutional and free, of the Jewish people would freely interact and discuss and raise issues and suggest solutions, not a body which would take decisions but would recommend new ideas? Is this something that we barely miss? At this point, I think we'll go maybe in the same order. I will call my friend Pierre to say a few remarks. You can speak from there, a couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes.
With pleasure, of course. Look, again, it's very interesting. Doesn't work?
The mic.
Yes. Look, it's very interesting. For me, it's the fifth time that I am here to talk in few minutes about the future of 2 million Jews abroad, and I'm always fascinating. I prepare my speech. It's almost the same as the past years. I keep the same things. We come back always to the same issue. One is, and very interesting, and Alan, we worked together a few years ago. It's a fact. The things change now. It's a time for Israel to support the diaspora. And is it with the gas? Is it with what's the meaning? We have problems in Jewish education. We have problem in security. We have problem on community centers. I mean, we know that. And thank you, Alan. It's a good news for today. We have doubled the budget from Israel. Okay, but it's peanuts, and you know better than anybody, Alan, my friend. We worked together on the same documents. We were in charge of this new paradigm, and we went to we have been appointed by the Prime Minister Olmert, and we came, and you remember, and we went to the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the recommendation is 400 million, you're right. Not shekels, dollars per year. But the recommendation, I mean, no, today is 400 million shekels. But the recommendation to the Prime Minister Netanyahu, that's one. We agree, it's time for Israel to support the diaspora. Israel exists, I'm sorry, I am provocative, because the diaspora create Israel. With Aliyah, without Aliyah, there is no Israel. I'm sorry, I'm not talking about me. Israel has been built with a diaspora, with the support. The 98% of the budget of Israel in 1948 was supported by the American Jews. And anyway, that's a fact. And maybe it's time to consider that diaspora is old, and Israel is like a father and a son. Means one, we need support on education, we need support in diaspora. One. Second, same issue the past years, and I love to do it. Second issue, that who represent the Jews in diaspora? Again, we have some institutions, some people, and I'm happy that I'm still invited here. But again, who can talk about the diaspora? And the third, all of us, we agree on the last thing, which is the most important. The center of the Jewish people today is Israel. And the role of Israel is fundamental. Future of the Jews is on the connection with Israel, physically or connect by a different way.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you very much, Pierre. Now, Philip.
Yes, thank you. I'll try and weave my comments in with some of the statements made. I also negotiate with Alan hard and long to try and get more money for the Jewish community in Australia. I agree. I think it is important that Israel provides more support. The truth is that fundraising in our community, in most communities, for general Israel activities has become much more difficult. Most of the philanthropists today want to tag their donations to specific projects, and that's a major challenge that Alan and the Jewish Agency faces. And we, my organization and the instrumentalities I represent, have to deal with that problem. So I agree with Pierre. I think the more support we could get, the better. But I want to just say something to, I think it was Jay's question. I think Jaffe and broaden it, the instrumentalities that are operating in Australia through our us being a conduit as the Zionist Federation, I think are doing a good job. And I'll give you two examples of where we are two nuts we've been trying to crack in our community, and they link in a way to people on the panel. Alexander spoke very well about, if you like, the disaffection of FSU Jewry. We, for many, many years, have been trying to deal with how do we bring the Jews from the former Soviet Union more into our kehillah, because they're disconnected. That's a fact. Most of them are, and we've been very worried about it. The missionary Christians, I think, were doing better with the Russians in Australia than we were, and we were concerned about it. We had researchers come, studies, analysis. The Chabad movement had some success, but as we know, most of these people are relatively secular, and it doesn't connect. So a few months ago, with the help of Alan's department and also the World Zionist Organization, we brought our first Russian-speaking shlicha. Why? Because we worked out that Israel was the connector for them. Not Chabad, not the Shul, not even the center of the Zionist Federation in Melbourne or Sydney, but Israel itself personified by a shlicha coming. And I can tell you, in 5 months, she has penetrated more into the Russian community than we have in 25 years. And she's telling us about schools and organizations and clubs and after-school activities we knew nothing about, because she's the real deal. And she represents Israel, and as Alexander put very well, Israel is very important for that community. The second one, Israelis. We're having also, you know all the stories, Israelis leaving Israel, all the issues that go with that. Very hard to connect them. We had our first conference, again, with the Jewish Agency a few weeks ago, talking about Israelis in Australia. What's the main thing that's come out of that, which we think will be the key to bringing them in with us? It's a shaliach for the tzofim, creating an Israeli scout tribe in Australia. Why? The parents, many of them, were in the scouts when they were in Israel. And it's not politics, it's not ideology, it's very parve, and they like the idea that there will be a tribe for their kids to go to. So we see, again, through the aegis of Israeli representation, Israeli life, the opportunity to bring them back. Professor Della Pergola's question about organizational issues, and this is where we are very, very concerned. The truth is this generation is not that interested in the collective. When I was growing up, everyone went to the same Yom Ha'atzmaut celebration. There was a speaker, a singer, a concert. We were all there. Our children don't like to go to those types of things anymore. We know it. Their Yom Ha'atzmaut may be sitting in their living room drinking red wine and listening to Israeli music. How do you maintain a collective when that's what young people want to do? This is a big challenge for us. So do we start creating a connection on Skype with 100 different living rooms or 1,000, where that becomes a collective Yom Ha'atzmaut celebration, even though they're doing it themselves? I don't know, but that's a key question for us.
Thank you, Philip. Now, Alexander
First, First, I want to say,
It's on.
it's on, yes. First, I want to say, the God give us this land, and the God tell us to build in this land the country, the state of Israel, for the all Jews in the world. So, for me, it's. I feel like every Jew what is come to Israel and stay here for the rest of their life, he did a very, very good thing. He did what God say. So, and I understand in this life, it's in this world, it's very hard to be very safe in all other countries, even in the United States. Even in the United States, you're absolutely right. There is some anti-Semitism more than in some other countries. Even in Europe, it's even first of all in France. You know, it's one of the biggest European community. We have anti-Semitism, assimilation, and anti-Semitism. You know. So what we must to do, everybody, Israeli and people from diaspora, if we want to live anywhere in the world, we must to make state of Israel the strong and powerful country. We must to do this. This is our security. If state of Israel will be, if state of Israel was in 1930s and 1940s, it will be no Holocaust. Holocaust, it can be again only if it will be not strong state of Israel. So what we have to do, everybody, we have to make a strong, powerful, rich, and very, very democratic country of Israel, state of Israel. So we must work on it, everybody.
Thank you, Sasha. Now Judith Liberant.
Well, three main points. I enjoyed very much this session, very much, because we do see convergences and we do see divergences also, which point to a very interesting, attractive, diversified Jewish world. The first point, I do celebrate, Alan, I'm not thinking now of shkalim or dollars, I do celebrate this idea, which I wanted to point to it, and probably I didn't emphasize it enough, that we need to recover a public Jewish conversation. A mature, a sophisticated one, when we recognize diversities and we look together, not only Israel and diaspora, inside Israel the different sectors, and inside the diaspora the same. Our communities are not homogeneous. And sometimes some sectors of our communities are closer and connected to, let's say, as I said, Sao Paulo, Miami, Brussels, or New York and Jerusalem than this idea that the main communications or the main interactions pass through the established national bodies. So this we must be aware. We are facing a new reality. And if I look at education, we do see also that the previous encompassing Jewish ethos is now also substituted by religious differences, ethnic differences, sub-ethnicities. In other words, what I want to say is that you're right. This civil religion, which has been sacralized through Israel, we now need to review from Bella to Watcher and see where we stand, because it's facing, I would say, very important challenges. A second point. I do think that today the world is facing new ways of building citizenship. The concept of dual citizenship is not new. We find it all over Europe, all over Latin America, growing the States. So this is also open to a world that is much more sensitive to multiple identities and multiple loyalties. And the third point that I want to refer is, it's certainly so, Sergio, as you pointed, Jewish communities are really very, very connected and worried with things like poverty, like marginality, like elderly, and when facing anti-Semitism and facing at the campus, we do need a shared conversation, because we know that today there is a connection of meaning in between critique of Israel, anti-Zionist stance, and anti-Semitism. And this we have to work together, no doubt. Otherwise, we won't understand why this difficulty that you pointed, which is really very intense for youth. Final remark, I said 3, there is a 4th one. We do live in a network society. Our youngsters, which seem to be no affiliated, they are affiliated in other ways. Network society, the society of internet, is flat, doesn't respond to hierarchies which are embodied in the federations, in the community organizations, etc. So facing this point, we know that there is a very intense Jewish life that we don't see in the surface. We don't see it, but it exists. They are finding new ways of building their identity, a kind, I would say, of patchwork, right? Different reference. So it's really a very, very hard challenge to ask from the established organization, but we have to expect to think in other ways of building the collective life of these young generations.
Thank you, Judith. And how not? Final word, Alan Hoffman.
Telegraphically, you asked about institutions. Are they adequate? Definitely not, including my own. You know that Jonathan Sarna wrote a wonderful little essay called The Great Awakening, in which he showed how the major institutions of Jewish life were created at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, to deal with the realities of that time. Today, they're not adequate. And I believe that what Judith finished with, we have a group here, I think you're all from Chicago in the blue shirts, a young group of people where an enlightened federation has sent some of its best high school leaders in order to be at a place like this. We need to be able to create within the old institutions, or to create new institutions that will take the natural network that Judith's speaking about that exists on Twitter and Facebook, and help the Jewish people that is ultimately the most networked people in the entire world to be able to think how to build institutions there. 2, gas. Sergio, why do you go so far to the gas? The Jewish people, through one of its institutions, bought land in the land of Israel that is still owned by the Jewish people. 13% of the land of Israel is still owned by the Jewish people. Why not take all of that land, give it to the government of Israel, and create out of that an endowment fund for the future of the Jewish people? Your peanuts would then become peanut bags.
Is the JNF here?
3, Rafi Nassi, absolutely right. We should not forget that in this polarization, along with the deepening connections to Israel and the civil religion of Israel, we have vast tracts of the young Jewish people that are drifting away. They're drifting by choosing their partners. They're drifting out of apathy. They're not members of institutions. More than 50% of most young Jews in the world do not belong to any Jewish institution at any one time. And we have to think about their engagement and their connection to Jewish life. And I believe Israel has a major role. I think that we see how the encounter with Israel is a way to stimulate identity. But that stimulation, Rafi, of identity has to lead to a greater involvement and immersion in Jewish life. And I do not believe that ultimately this is about Aliyah. This is ultimately about the role of Israel in intensifying the engagement of young Jews with their local community. And the fourth point, Maslow. We all learned when we went to college Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And right at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is shelter and all the thing, everything that deals with the most basic needs of it. And right at the top of Maslow is something called self-actualization, if you remember Maslow's diagram. Our problem is that most of Jewish philanthropy and Jewish wealth still flows to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to be able to change the paradigm in Jewish life so that if the Jewish future in these communities and in all communities, we need to make sure, and one of the things I didn't talk about is that in most of these communities, unfortunately, the issue of identity and Jewish future is still not enough of a priority for Jewish communities and for the resources of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.